Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. I am Manny Diaz. This week, our special guest is a good friend of mine down in San Angelo, Texas, a fellow San Angelo native, Mr. Drew Darby. He is representing House District 72. Mr. Darby, thank you so much for making time for us today.
It's my pleasure, Manny. You do a great job. Enjoyed your news commentaries here in San Angelo, and I think you're doing a great job up there in Abilene.
Well, I appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much. Well, you and Stan Lambert survived likely one of the toughest assaults in politics that we've seen here in West Texas. Tell me a little bit about what it means to come out as the victor in this District 72 race against Stormy Bradley, and what it meant to kind of just survive everything that went against you.
Manny, thanks for having me on, number one. But number two, looking back at the election a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I commented after the results came in, we may have won the most votes, but did we really win? Did we really win when a lot of our friends, a lot of fellow rural Republicans who support public education, they lost? And we have four fellow rural members that are facing runoffs because of that. And so the question becomes, did we win the most votes but come into a session in which we lose on policy? When I say policy, we lose on the opposition to vouchers in our public schools. Are we going to lose on that? Or have we lost our state? Well, we saw billionaires located outside the state of Texas throw their money at the election, and it had a dramatic impact on that. We did not bend our knees. We did not bow our heads. We did not kiss the ring. We simply stood up for our districts, and that is what's so troublesome about this whole election cycle, is that no longer can people here in West Texas vote on who they think should represent them in Austin, represents their values, represents folks who live and work and they've known in the Concho Valley or in the big country. So I'm hoping that these runoffs, we work hard and we bring those members back. Regardless, we're gonna work with the statewide leadership in order to move the state forward and address some of the real policy concerns that are facing our state in the next legislative section.
Well, and I know here in Abilene, we saw, the battle between Liz Case and Stan Lambert get very heated. And for you is between Stormy Bradley. Give me your take on just having to overcome that, or how you did overcome that, because that was certainly unprecedented what we've seen in local or I wouldn't call local, but just regional Texas races like this.
We've never seen anything like it. To think that over $2 million was spent against me in my campaign. I spent well over $1 million trying to defend my seat. So it's unprecedented that we have statewide leaders that would not only endorse against a sitting member of the House, but they would actively campaign against them. I certainly think we faced a Rubicon, a crossing of the river, if you will, in this state, when statewide elected officials can be involved in local House races and using out-of-state dollars and affect the outcome of the race. Then I'm fearful of the independence of the Texas House. I'm afraid that have we gone too far? Have people simply placed their trust in the money that's spent on advertising and not the relationships that they've built with their elected representatives? That's what's bothering me.
What do you think this does for your relationship with Governor Abbott? Y'all seem to be on the same page for much of your term, much of your time in office. But because he was endorsing Stormy Bradley, your opponent, what do you think this is going to do for that relationship? Do you foresee that perhaps that y'all can meet in the middle, or is it the point of no return?
Well, I look at that, Manny. I've known Governor Abbott long before he was governor of the state of Texas. When he decided to run for election the first time, I was one of the first elected officials in the state to endorse his candidacy. So I've been a longtime supporter of Governor Abbott, and I passed a lot of the bills that he felt were important. We simply disagreed on this one policy. He told me before the vote, he said, "Drew, can you vote with me for vouchers?" And I said, "Governor, with all due respect, I cannot. That is a bad policy for my rural districts here in West Texas. And quite frankly, Governor, and with all due respect, I don't represent you. I represent the folks back home. Can we smoke the peace pipe, so to speak, and come together and talk about the priorities of the state?" Yes, I certainly hope so. Because it's not, I represent 200,000 folks in the Concho Valley, and they need representation. They don't need somebody that simply ignores the political realities of where we are. I'm hopeful that we can work together to find good policy, and I think the people who are listening to this broadcast today and live and work in either the Big Country or the Concho Valley, they deserve the truth. They deserve representation that reflects their values and not an untruth spoon-fed them by out-of-state billionaires.
All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, more with House District 72 State Representative Mr. Drew Darby as we talk the future of rural West Texas, plus we'll get his take on a ruling from the Supreme Court that could impact the Texas-Mexico border. That and more right here on Big Country Politics.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, welcome back to Big Country Politics. This week, our special guest is House District 72 State Representative Mr. Drew Darby. He is representing much of the Concho Valley, but his representation does extend into Reynolds County and Coleman County here in the Big Country. So, Mr. Darby, we talked about just you surviving the primary against Stormy Bradley, which that was very similar to Stan Lambert and Liz Case, very nasty, as 45 Donald Trump would put it. Some would say, as coming on the heels of this election, that there's an assault on rural Texas, certainly areas like here in West Texas or perhaps in East Texas, or just areas that were just outside of the big major metropolitan areas. Would you consider that, or how would you put that?
Well, certainly, man, it is a struggle that exists today and has existed for a number of years. The struggle is not between Republicans and Democrats, it's between rural and urban. And that reality is that people that live in cities, they want our resources. They want our oil and gas revenue. They want electricity generated. They want our hide, hair, food, fiber, everything that allows them to live in a city exists here in rural Texas. This is about vouchers. This is about public dollars going to private and parochial hands without any accountability, any transparency, or any open enrollment policy. This is what this is about. It's about follow the dollars. And that's what I cannot understand or contemplate why our statewide elected officials would seek to impose their philosophy and the representation in this area over one issue. The question becomes, and we saw it in Representative Lambert's case and in my case, the people that live and work here in the district pushed back. They said, "No, we don't want you to decide who represents us. We're going to decide that on the basis of qualification."
The question moving forward is probably not a matter of if, school vouchers gets presented back to the House, but when by Governor Abbott. Do you foresee that this passes next time around?
Well, clearly, Governor Abbott is going to maintain his insistence on this policy. I happen to believe that there's still enough opposition in the House to push back against that, or at least create an atmosphere that you have to negotiate in order to get a good policy point that you can negotiate on. So I'm hopeful that, and I'm praying that like-minded folks across the state will come out and support public education candidates who stood for a cause, who stood tall at a time when they could have shrank into the darkness. There were folks that voted against voucher, but yet they said, I don't want to mess with it anymore. I'm going to choose not to return. And there were 5 of those of the 21 that did just that. But I do think that with the current composition of the House and what we can hope to achieve in these runoffs, that there will still be significant opposition to the implementation of a voucher program in Texas.
Let's kind of transition to, another issue here in the state of Texas, SB 4. This lets Texas police arrest people suspected of illegally crossing the Texas-Mexico border. The Supreme Court ruled that could happen, but hours following that on Tuesday, a U.S. appellate court blocked the new immigration law that the Supreme Court allowed that allowed it to go into effect. Give us your thoughts on this and what needs to happen for there to be productive change.
Of course, SB 4 was designed to recognizing that we're frustrated as a state. We're frustrated about the illegal immigration that are coming across our borders. And so the legislature, recognizing that this normally is a federal policy, federal immigration policy, but the feds have chosen not to enforce our own immigration laws. So out of desperation, the state says, what can we do? Well, let's empower police officers to, where there is a citizen that they have determined is here illegally, that with due process, that citizen could be returned to the country of their origin. So watching that piece of legislation after it left the legislature and was signed by the governor, it's like a ping pong match. There were multiple lawsuits, and there are various steps in the litigation process. And so the latest iteration that you mentioned was that the case was in the 5th Court of Appeals. It appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court dissolved the stay, and then it went back to the 5th Court of Appeals, and now there's a current stay in process. Hopefully there'll be a change in federal policy. If we have a change in the White House, hopefully we'll have a change in looking at the immigration policy of this country, and we'll come to a point where we can have sensible, restrained immigration, where people follow the law and enter this country legally and apply for those immigration slots. SB 4 is simply an attempt to do something. We're all frustrated. What did we do? Did we go too far? I'm sure the Supreme Court will tell us if we went too far. If we went just far enough, then hopefully the Supreme Court will tell us that also. But this legislation was born out of the frustration of the legislature, not only our governor, but the House and the Senate, that the current status is unsatisfactory.
Representative Drew Darby, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Manny. I appreciate it. Always glad to be with you.
Yes, sir. Well, for House District 72's Texas State Representative Drew Darby, I'm Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation right here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next time. God bless.